Theme for this year is redefining our future heritage, and we've convened these young leaders from all across the country to come and have conversations around what needs to happen, what's happening. All right. But before we get into the stuff that people want us to go into, but who's the minister? Where's the minister from? Who is he?
Okay, now thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, and happy Heritage Day, and thank you very much for the invitation. Everyone calls me Spooter, because I'm a prolific footballer. If there's one thing I know, it's playing football. I wear jersey number 10, number 12. I'm a middle fielder. So just to have a comprehension of the kind of football I play, if you look at Zidane, no pace, but precision and just intelligence.
Precision and intelligence.
That's it. On the field of play.
Of course, on the
there's
field.
an intelligent player, and there's a fast player, there's a powerful player, there are all types of players. I'm in that category. Born and bred in Atteridgeville, siblings 8, I'm number 7, born of parents very conservative from rural Limpopo, Ramokgopa, a village called Ramokgopa, the first generation of people to settle in Atteridgeville, like I said, and then studied civil engineering, master's business leadership, master's public administration, and also a PhD in public affairs, and avid reader, and a keen sports follower. Of course, football is at the top, rugby and cricket, keep to myself, and then also an activist. So that's me.
Do you then give me permission to call you Sputla?
Yes, I prefer that you call me Spooter.
Okay.
Because part of the problem with the titles is that they create a bit of tension and also hierarchy. So don't expect that I have answers to all the questions. I think part of conversations is that you get to know the things that you don't know. And when you read a lot, you get to know that you don't know. And that's what drives you to read more and more. And then when you stick to titles, the expectation is that I have all the answers. I genuinely don't have all the answers. If you could keep it at the level of Spooter, then it levelizes the conversation. Like genuinely, just levelize the conversation, and you will see it will be very robust, direct, candid about the nature of the problem. So don't just forget that you are talking to someone who carries the title of a minister. Just refer to me as a Spooter, an honest engineer who's trying to contribute to the resolution of the single biggest existential problem in our country, which is a electricity challenge. Yeah.
But Sputla, I'm also surprised you didn't speak about your prolific dancing aspects that you are very known for as well. Do you enjoy that people refer to you as a dancer?
Oh, I'm an exceptionally happy person. I'm very, very happy. Don't wear your troubles. All of us are going through very difficult periods, so I will not allow anyone to dictate how I carry myself in public. And by the way, I don't know how it got into the public. It was a family Christmas party. I'm the one who brings life into the party. There's 3 things that we can do in Atteridgeville that we do very well. The first one is that we study. Some of the most advanced academics in the country, they hail from Atteridgeville. The second one is that we play football exceptionally well. And the third one is that we can dance. What you see there is nothing. You are very young, but they can't see some normal it will go on the social media, and they say every time I dance, we go to stage 6. Let's wait for it. One day is one day.
So walk us a little bit. I mean, we just had a panel of young people, some of which are in student politics, and I want to just get a sense of How, I mean, compared to the rest of the ministers in the country and quite frankly continent, you're relatively young. So how do you get into politics? How do you end up there?
Oh, like I said, I mean, my activist days, they really stretch back from high school. I'm from a highly politically conscious family. 3 of my brothers went into exile, MK combatants. My house really was a meeting place of activists in Akredville. Those who know the lie of the land, that side. Our area used to be called Beirut, the most militant. Per capita, we produce the most number of MK combatants than any other place in the whole country. And like I said, my home was a meeting place, and ordinarily then, because raised in that environment, became politically conscious, very active at the school. But I'm one of those, I finished my matric when I was like 15.
Yeah. 15?
Yeah, I jumped
Oh,
grades.
you jumped grades.
Yes, and then I went to university. My first year of university at 16, as you know, the calendar, I don't know what's the situation now. The calendar of elections for student organizations was like around this time. So I became the chair of SASCO at that young age, University of Durban, Westville, and came back, of course, led my branch, Akredville, the zone, the region, for 3 consecutive terms, became the youngest councillor in the city of Tshwane, became the youngest mayor in the whole of the Republic, and I guess the rest is history. So I don't see myself, I'm not a politician. My primary income is not derived from holding public office. I'm just an activist. So even if tomorrow you'll say, because I'll explain, I guess we'll get to a point where I explain the nature of the electricity challenge, because there's a distinction between energy and electricity. Is that my ministry is very unique. Is that the more it exists, it simply communicates the fact that you still have a load shedding problem. So I'm doing everything possible to extinguish the ministry, to put myself out of public office, and then I can walk into any corporate and execute my work as a professional.
And I mean, I think the conversations that were taking place, I mean, of course, there's quite a bit of frustration around the state of leadership in the country, and of course, having career politicians, which is what you're talking to now. And I think, is there your perception and what you think should happen? Do you think there should be more leaders who are intelligent and move with speed and are competent in the soccer field, as you were describing your talents in the soccer field, but also outside? And how do we get to that? As young people that are full here in the room who are building competence and have competence currently, how do we galvanize and get to a point where there are more leaders in the country who speak about the positions they hold as needing to be extinguished, especially if the positions are directly responsible for dealing with the challenge?
Yeah, my view is that for you to change the menu, you must be at the table. And one of the things that I lament the most, also with my nephews and nieces, of course, gone through university, is that they sit on the sidelines and they provide commentary on what needs to happen, if you like, in the broad arena of politics. And I'm not advocating for everyone to be in politics, but I think there must be a degree of activism in the space that you find yourselves in. So it's particularly unhelpful to sit on the margin and just bug instructions. You have to be on the field of play to be able to change how we organize ourselves. And I think one of the biggest criticism of this generation that I have relative to ours was that you largely are on the margins. You don't immerse yourself in the body politics, politic of the country, this party, that party. And of course, you rely on the platforms, social media. to express your views. So don't go very far to change the conversations. I think it's important that if you really want to make a meaningful contribution, you must find yourselves in those spaces. And I think your organization does exceptionally well because you have carved a niche for yourself and you are able to exercise your agency. So to get to a stage where politicians are anchored on merit, meritocracy, performance, you have to be part of that conversation because you are going to be led by people who are undesirable, perhaps myself or someone else, for as long as you are at the margin. So it's important that your voice gets to be heard. I know when I talk to my nephews and nieces, they tell me that when you go to this organization, this meeting, the conversations are hostile. We are antagonized because we are seen to be the enlightened, educated, but we must fight the battle there.
Yeah,
so I think it's not helpful just to convene amongst ourselves as the enlightened, in inverted commas, the privileged, or those who are aspiring to those positions, and think that those in the townships less privileged are not invested in the resolution of this problem. They are going to organize themselves in a manner that they define the agenda, and you're going to follow that agenda. So it's important that you are beginning to put your foot step into the game, and then you are able to raise your issues internally. I mean, of course, it's public knowledge. We are in the ANC, you can see, if you look at the NEC that is there, I think about 80% of us, of that NEC, we have some association with SASCO. Whether we're at the leadership level like myself or Comrade Makura, you mentioned them, we are from the ranks of SASCO. If you like, it's a generational transition, not necessarily take over. Again, 90% of the current NEC has not been into exile. A significant number of us, I've never been arrested. I don't know, I only know the smell of a tear gas but we took interest in that, to say that we want to be in the state, we want to express our views. That our views prevail is a different conversation, but they've got an opportunity to find traction for as long as we are in the ring.
You know, that gets heavy criticism. What you're pointing out as a positive is to say, well, majority of the people that are in the NSCA, came up into SASCO. Do you think, and this is the last question I think I'm going to ask before we get into the electricity conversation, do you think that there's a danger in attracting into SASCO people who don't necessarily have a desire to change society, but have a desire to become an NEC member?
Okay. When I say SASCO, it's a metaphor of student political organization. So it could be any other
one,
student formation. No. I mean, if you come to, of course, things have changed from our time. I know that the biggest battle now to be a student leader is proximity to determining tenders, who's going to be the bus company that ferries students from this residence to that, who is a developer who's going to be accredited by NSFAS to be the suitable accommodation for student accommodation. So the discussion has evolved. I do accept that, and I've got significant limitations about some of the dynamics that prevails there. But I guess that our generation, when we went into SASCO, really the intention was to seek to resolve student problems, especially those who come from a situation of underprivilege. Like I said, my father was just an average worker. I think my mother worked for not more than 7 years her entire life. But all 8 of us went to university, postgraduate qualification. Is on the back of the fact that the struggles about the financial exclusions were won. And then you are able to take those values, if you like, that orientation and perspective into other arenas. So when I was the CEO of the Johannesburg Fresh Produce Market, the trading company in Johannesburg, so the arena really was in the space of corporate, just progressive views, or at least my own subjective views on how I I thought was the articulations we brought to bear in those conversations. So I'm just saying that arena is not limited to politics. You could find yourself wherever you are, but I think what it has engendered is just progressive views, pressure and solidarity with the poor and the downtrodden, and those that are marginalized, the pursuit for an egalitarian society. Of course, it's aspirational. I really don't think that we'll get to that stage. But the aspirations are what keeps us alive.
You know, we hear this word egalitarian all the time. Yes. Do we know what this word means? What is egalitarian? What does that refer to?
Well, in simple terms, I mean, it's an equal society at all levels. So essentially, you are undermining hierarchy. Its origins really is in socialist, communist countries. But I'm saying that we can give it a different color. Essentially to say that the levels of inequality must not be as pronounced. Everyone must have an opportunity to realize their potential, to discover what they stand for, and then they are able to pursue that. The system is designed to support them, and not necessarily to the advantage of the elite and those who are in positions of power.
I like how you were saying the system is designed, because from the room it was coming across quite strongly that the design of the system and the intentions of the system aren't necessarily being expressed in society, which is why we find ourselves in the situations that we are in, where there's inequality, where there's limited job opportunities, etc., etc. I want to start where you started, to say, what then is the difference between energy and the energy crisis and the electricity crisis?
Oh, well, electricity is just a subcomponent of energy. So energy really talks to significantly more endowments. So oil is part of that configuration, gas is part of that configuration. But what we're looking at is just a small element, essentially the exploitation of those resources to be able to power the South African economy. So you know that we enter in the arena of renewables, so we've got significant endowments. So let's look at an emerging industry in the world and in the country, green hydrogen, essentially the dismembering of a compound hydrogen into its constituent element. So that's water in the main and hydrogen. So you separate the two through a process of electrolysis. I guess a lot of the audience.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. I think
okay.
a fair amount of
us. One of my weaknesses is that I get to be a bit more technical. I'm very comfortable in that space, because it's one thing to rhetoricize, it's something else to explain how you are resolving a problem at a technical level. Because you are confronted with a technical problem that has got the manifestations of the political economy. So just going back, there are new frontiers, green hydrogen, so we've got significant amount of resources. So like I said, it's a dismembering of that compound. We are using the sun, we are using electrolyzers through a process of electrolysis to separate the two, and then we can have green ammonia, which is a big input into your fertilizers. It's got the implications on the cost of food, because what the war in Ukraine has done, it has increased the input cost for production of primary goods in the world, and of course can go and ask the farming sector. The cost of inputs have gone down. So this will be your fertilizers, the cost of electricity, because they have to do two things to be able to undermine or mitigate against load shedding. The first one is that the upfront capital cost, they must buy, if you like, diesel generators. Depending on the size and the scale of your production, I mean, diesel generator can range from 5,000 to over R1 million. But that's not the big ticket. The big ticket is the running cost. You buying diesel on a daily basis to support your farming activity, and in the main, 25% of production, of revenue by farmers comes from those activities that rely on uninterrupted and quality electricity. So this has to do with your irrigation, because you must pump the water up. Even if you have boreholes, you have to pump it up. You need electricity, and then the pack house where you package whatever you've produced, and then also maintaining the cold chain, because some of this horticulture, you must maintain the cold chain to improve, to extend their shelf lives, but also to maintain the quality. So if you don't do that, if they have to invest a lot upfront, and they must recover that cost somewhere else, and they'll recover it from the end consumer. And if you look at the percentage of disposable income by the poor that is spent on the purchase of basic basket of food, is disproportionate to a middle class person. So inflation causes significant injury on the poor, and then you can place it back to load shedding. So load shedding is an existential question, a problem in both economic and social terms.
So you're touching on quite a lot, and perhaps to bring us into it, we're talking about the value chain of putting food into someone's home, and how the electricity crisis is affecting that, and how it contributes to inflation, or the amount of money that I'm now using to buy a banana this year versus the amount of money I used to buy a banana last year or the year before that, and that's what we're referring to, where the inflation is concerned. And you're talking about renewable energy almost as the potential solution to the challenge that is load shedding or blackouts, as a lot of people and a lot of us call it now. But I want us to come back to the technicalities of load shedding itself in a way that the people in the room will understand, and in as far as it affects the people in the room. So right now, what we know for sure about load shedding is that there are stages, and these stages are related to the amount of perhaps electricity that's available. And I perhaps want to have a conversation about how much power do we need in a day? How much do we need? Where does this power come from? Where, are we doing well with coal? I mean, there's a story around how we export so much coal, and that's the reason why we don't have electricity. And then there's a story about the coal that's being exported is not the same as the coal that we are using, it's different grades. So I just wanted to come back to really the fundamental language of load shedding in as far as us as the regular person on the streets interacts with it.
Oh, that's an excellent question. So let me, and just 3 minutes so that I explain the ecosystem. Or I could go back into history how we started the idea of electricity really was to support mining activity in the country, but it has evolved over a period of time. So you have demand. So demand is what you and I consume on a daily basis. When you switch on a kettle, you take a shower, the geyser is on, you watch TV, the appliances are on. That's at the household level. And that constitutes, if you like, about 35% of total consumption. And then the 65% that is industry, BMW to manufacture it, Roslin, your big mines, your smelters, that the big consumers of electricity. Put that together, that's your demand. So the amount of energy that is required. So the peak of demand really is around winter. Because for factories, their demand is almost like, has plateaued. So there's so much amount of electricity that they consume. But what drives it up significantly, of course, is two things. It's economic growth when there's new industry opening, new factories opening, and then households. And then households consume really a lot during winter. Why you consume during the peak period, PM peak in winter. Why is that the case? Because we're coming back home almost at the same time, we cook, and then you have to put the heater on and all of that, do the reading. So you find that...
And what's the percentage deficit during that time? So there's 35% demand for households, and then during the time that you're talking about, there's then an increase So what does that increase look like by way of percentage?
No, at peak, we consume 35%.
35%, or 35%
because
peak.
industries, a lot of them have drones,
Sure.
except those who work 24/7. So at the peak is about 34,000 megawatts. That's what you need to ensure that you are able to supply everything. So that's the demand. So the demand must be fed from somewhere. So these are your power stations. So if you look at the configuration of the electricity ecosystem in the country, is that when they looked at the solutions to power the mines and also new demands from households, because really the genesis of electricity was to help industry to grow many years ago, was to find the fuel source. And in this instance, the fuel source is coal. And they located that the cheapest coal you can get, not the high-grade coal that you can get, is in Mpumalanga. And that's why 12 of the 14 power stations are located in Mpumalanga. And when you design the generators, if you like, you design them relative to the coal specification. So they are designed for that. And just to your question, the high-grade quality coal, it can be high-grade, but it doesn't lend itself to the design of this power station. They can run on cheap coal, and that's why you can ship out the high-grade coal. So there's no relationship.
We don't lose anything. We don't lose anything by using
No. All you are doing is that there's higher levels of emissions, what we call the calorific value, so the burn rate of the coal. That's what we are losing, and therefore the amount of emissions into the environment. So there is no relationship between the export of the... Yes, but remember these were
decisions made long
were designed, this power station, some of them are 50 years old. It's before we had the conversation about emissions, what it costs to the health of people in the catchment area and its relationship to climate change.
Infrastructure, it's the infrastructure we got.
That's the first generation of this coal-fired power station. So we can generate up to about 54 gigawatts, about 54,000 megawatts. So on paper, your peak is 34. What we have installed is 54. Yeah, so you shouldn't have a problem.
Sure.
Because generation exceeds demand, or what we have installed exceeds demand. But over a period of time, you have retired some of these power stations. That's one. Two is that you have not maintained these power stations. So the rate at which they are able to generate is then compromised. Just think of a car. So you bought the car, you can reach a maximum speed of 120 kilometers an hour. You have not maintained it, it's still on the road. Put your foot to the pedal, try to accelerate, all you reach is 60 kilometers an hour because you have underinvested in that. And then we've got into a situation where what we are generating, when I got into the office, was 48%. So we're generating about 25,000 megawatts, and we know the peak at winter will go to about 34. So you have a difference of about 10,000 megawatts. And then there is someone called a system operator. What the person does, his or her responsibility is to balance demand and generation, to close the delta, the gap. And then if generation far exceeds, demand far exceeds generation, he introduces an instrument that denies you your right to electricity, so that you drive down demand, and then you are able to levelize or find a situation of equilibrium.
And that's how we
what you and I call load shedding. And then the higher the stages of load shedding have no relationship with grid collapse. If anything, the higher you go stages of load shedding, it should give you the comfort that the system operator is alert, knows what the difference is, and therefore is enforcing.
No.
And this is you must allow first to be explained the technical terms that you differ with them is a different. You'll come later. I'm trying to explain to you how you are resolving this problem. Because if you don't resolve, why is he or she doing that? Is to maintain what you call the frequency, the levels of how this energy is fed into the system at 50 hertz. If it goes above or below that, there is what we call grid collapse. What just last week Nigeria experienced, what is in fact a blackout? There's a distinction between a blackout and load shedding. There's grid collapse, there is no energy that is being fed because the system has collapsed. That's what the system operator does.
I think we can, as a society, appreciate the need for the intervention. Okay? I think we can appreciate the need for it given. But why is it that, where did we fall short in being able to stay ahead of this problem? Why are we chasing?
Yeah, I remember earlier on, I was answering the question, just explain what is load shedding. But I'm not appointed to explain load shedding. I'm appointed to solve load shedding. And this is where we're getting to it. So you must be methodical. I'm answering the question. Now we're moving a higher gear. And this is the business end.
You want us to move forward. You don't want us to look at...
No. I'm getting to that.
Oh, you're getting to that.
No, I was saying the point, what I was answering also for the benefit of the audience.
The terminology.
Was to explain. But now I want to solve the problem.
Yes.
And I'm taking you how we're solving the problem. And it's a function of the decisions that we have made historically. So when we transitioned into a democratic South Africa, we liquidated a system that was universally categorized as a crime against humanity, that is apartheid. What it meant is that the democratic government had to expand, if you like, the provision of electricity to areas that were under service or areas that didn't have access to electricity. So a lot of you in this room might not know that there have been significant number of townships across the country that didn't have access to electricity. The levels of penetration by 1994, I think, were just below 50%. By that I mean less than 50% of the households were connected to electricity. So what the democratic government wanted to do that, as part of the democratic dividend, the profits of democracy, we need to make sure that we achieve what we call universal access. Everyone must have access to electricity. Just for the record, where we are now, 93% of households have got access to electricity, they are connected. Of course, we have a different problem. You've got access to electricity, but it's not available when you need it. So that's load shedding. So when the democratic government took over, and also its ambition to industrialize, expand the industrial base, attract investments into the country, it meant that when you have more factories, you are going to add load. Essentially, you are going to have more demand that is placed on the grid. And before the period of 1994, we had excess generation capacity. We had the cheapest electricity of any country in the world. And that's why we could give a smelter in Mozambique electricity almost for free. I mean, the rate at which we are charging the smelter is something that today can't be thought of. And remember, because we're generating excess capacity, you needed to balance the grid. And this is the point I want to make. Even when you generate more than what you consume, the grid can collapse. So you are looking for people who can take big amounts of electricity so that you balance the grid, and you say to the person, I'll sell it for you for cheap, almost give it to you for free.
So you can't keep it, you can't store it in other words.
Yes, you say you have it, you can store it. But it's flexible, so you can decide to switch off the generators, but it's expensive to start them and then to switch them off. Absolutely, well, yes, sure. You got it, yes. Now we are on it. And then in 1997, the industry players, ESCOM in particular, says to the ANC government, our government, look, at the rate at which we are connecting people to the grid, at the rate at which the economy is going, we are going to run into a problem 10 years later, because we are able to do a computation and do an extrapolation. Not the projection and extrapolation are two different things. So I'm able to map, if you like, a generation, if you like, so generation on the y-axis, on the x-axis, the number of years, and at the rate at which I'm generating, in so many years I'm going to have a problem of amount of generation. And they say to an ANC government, we need to invest in new generating capacity. And then we say, no, the private sector will resolve that problem. 10 years later, 2005 or so, we are sitting with that problem. And very quickly we make a decision, we need additional generating capacity. These chaps were right. Then we initiate 2 projects, Medupi and Kgosientso. And then these are the 2 individually, the biggest single power stations to be constructed anywhere in the world. The size of the PEX. The PEX really is your generator. So it's got, if you look at earlier power stations, Andrina, Arnold, there were 10 PEX, if you like 10 engine, each engine gives you 200 megawatts. So that station gives you about 2,000 megawatts. That's what they were giving you. And then there's a mid-age power station, so I'm talking about Kriel, Kendal, and Majuba. Those ones, there are 6 PEX now, 6 engines, but each engine gives you about 600 megawatts. These were constructed 35 years ago. And then we come and say, now we're doing Medupi and Kgosientso. Each engine gives you 800 megawatts. Okay. And then we do 6 engines, 4,000 megawatts each. Now these are huge power stations. Those who did engineering, you'll know that from the period of planning, so planning that I need this power station, to the point of delivering the megawatts, getting the actual electricity, is anything between 8 to 12 years. That's how long it will take you. 2007, we take a decision, but the crisis is coming now in 2 years. It's happening, yes. Then we accelerate, and then suddenly, 3 years later, we are into the ground. When in fact, the planning process should have taken you much longer. So you can see the rate at which we are. And that is why today, almost 14, 15 years later, last week, 2 weeks back, after 160 billion rands of investment, there was no single megawatt that was coming from Kgosientso. 160 billion rands later, 14 years later, not a single megawatt was coming out. And it was as a result of this, the hastiness of this decision. And then you put into the mix something that I don't want to understate, the issues of corruption. So you can see when you go to Medupi and Kgosientso, some of the components they've installed, they say it comes from the original equipment manufacturer, but you can see this is not from the original equipment manufacturer, and the rate of wear and tear is much faster. And that's why we have the kind of failures that we have. And then on the other side, the ESCOM balance sheet starts to deteriorate. When I say deteriorate, it becomes very expensive to run these machines. And then as a result, you are under collecting from municipalities. Now they owe ESCOM about 64 billion rands. And then ESCOM doesn't have the money to invest in what we call maintenance, planned maintenance. There are 2 types of planned maintenance. The one is philosophy maintenance. Philosophy maintenance simply means the following. You bought a car, and then they say after 15,000 kilometers, bring it in. You want to, in the morning you get it later. Because the original equipment manufacturer, BMW, knows that, if you like, the driving habits, the kind of road conditions requires that after 15,000, just bring, there's nothing wrong with your car, but bring it in. I know what I want to do. I want to change the plugs quickly, change the oil, and then you'll get it back. We didn't do that. And then there's planned maintenance. Planned maintenance, you know that I had, let's use the example of a car. You took your BMW, you went Bundu Beshi, then what do you call, there's something wrong with some parts. And if I continue to run this car, I might run into shock absorbers, I might run into a problem. Nothing wrong with the mechanical issues of the car, but if I continue to run it, I'm going to run into problems. Let me take it in, so you check, I'll have money in 3 months' time. You set an appointment, I'm bringing my car in, I think the shocks are a problem. They tell you that, no, we think you are going to pay 10,000 rand, we have saved a little, and that's clear. We didn't invest in that. And what is the cumulative effect of that? Is that these machines are underperforming, and we are sitting with a problem that's confronting us.
As the more you're articulating the historical reasons for why we're where we are now, it has a heavy decision-making undertone, and it's the decision was made, which is so we could foresee the problem, we made a decision at some point, whether there was a leg or not, to start. But when we started, it was almost too late because it takes us a particular amount of time to build these systems. But because we are now responding, we are being hasty in how we are executing, and we're not completely thinking about the entire balance sheet for what the implications are of having this generation capacity that we're now creating. Okay, so I can understand that, and I think I appreciate the introspective, as it were, stance that you're taking to say, no, the decisions were not made in time, and I really do appreciate that. And I want us to move to what do we need to do? What do we need to do? I mean, of course, we can have a conversation about fixing the broken car, and I think that's an obvious one. We need to fix the broken car. Whether or not we have capacity to buy new cars is something else. Whether we have capacity to perhaps not use a car, or perhaps fetch a car from someone else and borrow it. So what direction are we taking by way of solutions where we are now?
Oh, great question. So now it's more about how are we fixing what we are doing. So not necessarily about what we're thinking of doing now. I want to share with you what we're doing now.
Fantastic.
So and also share with you what we think will be the results. So of course the president announced what we call the Energy Action Plan last year in July. I think we reached the height of load shedding, uninterrupted period of stage 6 load shedding. So you could see the crisis here with us, and we could tell that the crisis was coming. Now it has come. It was sitting with us. So the president said, no, let's make these interventions, energy action plan. And then in March of this year, then took a decision that the nature of the problem requires that someone must eat, sleep, breathe the resolution of this problem. And then he chose to introduce the Minister of Electricity, and then I had the unenviable task of being the one chosen to lead the efforts to respond to that within the context of the Energy Action Plan. So this is what we are doing, and I'll tell you what the results are. The first one is to understand what is the problem I'm dealing with, and that's why I had to go to each and every power station and then ask with an engineering lens, what is the problem? So I know the stage 6, I know the stage 5. So what is the problem? And of course, before you go there, I would have read the history of what has transpired at this power station and that power station. So this is what we found. The first one was that there has been a hemorrhaging or the loss of skills in Eskom over a period of time. And that the people who were in charge really relatively inexperienced to run machines of that size. And the ones that have got huge implications on the South African economy. The second one we found was that there's been a lot of erosion of incentives for workers at Eskom. So for an example, I think over the past 3 years or so, they have not received any increase. It's a different conversation whether the increase is deserved or not. That's a different conversation. But essentially you find a workforce that is despondent. And then the third one, you find that as part of our international commitments to decarbonize, essentially to move away from fossil fuels, which is really a dirty fuel force, to go into renewables. We had made a decision that we are going to decommission a number of power stations. Decommission means we are going to close these power stations. We had decommissioned about 2,900 megawatts between 2018 and 2020. So we added 3 stages of load shedding, and we couldn't illustrate where are we going to get this additional megawatts to replace that which we are taking out. Leave alone the fact that you need additional capacity to grow the South African economy. And in terms of the Eskom plan, what they call the 2035 plan, they meant to remove another 5,100 megawatts between now 2023 and 2027. So essentially between 2018 and 2027, you would have removed 8,000 megawatts, and this is in the midst of an energy shortage. And my view was that You can't do that. No self-respecting country does that. In the midst of an energy deficit, you still advocate for the closing of power stations. When I was at Camden, one of the units was meant to be closed the following day. And the decision I made there on the spot was that, no, we are not going to close that unit. The unit must operate. And then the fourth problem you had was a significant amount of underinvestment. The point I made earlier on that you are not investing in these power stations, we are not maintaining them. So it's like you are running this car, running. You are guaranteed it's going to fail at some point. You just don't know when is it going to fail. And that's the problem that we're sitting with at ESCOM. And that's why they can make a projection and say that we'll be on stage 2 during the day, stage 4 later. And then in the midst of that, then release another notice to say, sorry, we are going to stage 4 and then stage 6. It's because the units keep on failing. And that's a function of our actions for not investing. And why was ESCOM not investing is because of a constrained balance sheet. The money was simply not there as a result of a number of factors. So what are we doing to resolve that? The first one is to bolster the capacity. So essentially you go back to the retired engineers, those with the experience to say come back. Come back to do two things. First, to help us to exploit these assets, to sweat the assets so that they give us the megawatts. Secondly is to train the ones that are in charge so that, you know, it's a transitioning period and they are able to accumulate the kind of skills that are required. So that's the first one. And then we identified the power stations that they required attention. I'm sure you have heard something called the Pareto principle. For 20% effort, I'm going to get 80% of the returns. So we know the power stations that are notorious for giving us low performance, what in technical terms we call the energy availability factor. 6 of them, Tutuka, Kendall, Krill, Matimba. We identified them and then we threw in these experts to help us to improve that energy availability factor. The second thing we did was to say that we can't continue without any additional resources from a financial point of view. So I told you about the technical resources. We went out to farm those resources, essentially went to the retired people to come in. And then we went to National Treasury and say, we need money. We must fix this unit. So let me tell you, stage 6 load shedding costs the country 1 billion rands a day. Stage 6 load shedding contracts the South African economy by 5%. No one would invest in a country that can offer you reliable electricity. Stage 6 load shedding 2022 was responsible for taking out 620,000 people out of jobs. And the projection 2023, over 850,000 people are going to lose their jobs as a result of load shedding. So the economy will not grow. So we need to do something to resolve what is essentially a structural problem. So National Treasury said, no, Scooter, we understand your submission. We'll give you 254 billion rand. So that you don't just do the issues around the generation, fixing the power stations, you invest in the transmission lines, the power line. We got that money, and then that's the money that we are investing in there. The third thing was that people are disillusioned, so we need to resolve the issues of the PEGs. But we say to a power station, you need to improve the performance of these power stations, and then we gave them the necessary incentive, the increases, and all other incentives that were taken away. And then the fourth area, we're saying we're not closing any power station. So for a worker at Camden, Arnold, who thought that he or she would be out of a job 2027, 2026, we say we're extending the life of that power station. The accumulation of all of these things sees us getting into improved generating capacity. When we came into the office, I said we had 48% energy availability factor. Now we're at about 62%. So essentially it's a 14 percentage point increase. Just to give you an indication, 1 percentage point increase is about 477 megawatts. So that's what we have added. And then we went and said there's a problem in Kusile. This is the power station that can help us to resolve load shedding. So when I sat with the team there, they said, look, this is the plan we have to return the units to service. There are 3 units that had failed October of last year as a result of something called the flue gas desulfurization unit. It's an engineering component that removes the amount of sulfur content that is released into the atmosphere. We said we must fix this, and then they said to me, we can return these units by December of 2023, this year. And I said, no man, let's look at the activities that are required for us to return these units. And you find that they had sequenced some of the activities. Sequence means you do one after the other, when in fact some of them could be done parallel. Yes, and then we reduced that period by 2 months earlier, so they are coming back earlier. So what we know now, as I conclude now, so I told you now we're at about 60%, 61% energy availability factor. So when you see load shedding, no load shedding over the weekend, it's not because it's over the weekend. It's because it's an accumulation of work that has been done. Of course, during long weekend, the demand is low, but the answer is here. We are happy to say that one of the 3 units is coming back now. Now in October, we're bringing 2 units. Remember, each unit is 800 megawatts, so we're giving 2,400 megawatts.
And that will maybe increase us from 61% to around 74%.
Yeah, it's about, I said 2,000, so it's about 4 percentage points that you are
So it's 4%.
Yeah,
so
4 percentage points.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And then in November, we are retaining another unit of the 3, 800 megawatt. It takes us to 2,400 megawatts. And then in December, we are firing a unit that was not fired before. Firing means we are starting it for the first time.
From scratch.
Yeah, unit number 5, it's another 800 megawatts, so it's 3,200 megawatts. So between now, October and December, we're getting, like 3,200 megawatts. So you are removing 3 stages of load shedding, if you were to use the 1 stage of load shedding. And then go Midupi, there's a power station, there's a unit that was, when I went in there, they said this unit will come back only in 2024 because these items, buying a generator is a long lead item. The long lead item means you must wait for the generator to be manufactured.
Sure.
So the waiting period for that was like 3 to 4 years. You have the money, you place it today, you'll only get it in 4 years. And then we asked the question, can't we get a used generator somewhere in the world? And we found the one that meets the specification is 35 years old. So they'll say, yo, 35 years old. No, these units are designed to run for 50 years. For 50 years.
So you're buying 16 years.
So what does it mean? So
gives you time to buy a new one.
We place the order for the new one, and then we truncate the return of that unit by about a year. We're getting another 800 megawatts in April of next year. So
you're buying
this period, we are sitting at about 4,000 megawatts, 4 stages of load shedding. And then it doesn't end there. We said, but there are neighboring countries that have got excess generating capacity.
Sure.
Mozambique in particular. So you'll see now we are getting an additional 1,000 megawatts.
Yes, we heard that story.
And then the last one is you must have new generating capacity from renewables, wind and solar. The problem with that is that it's variable energy. What I mean by variable energy, you are going to get the benefit of solar if the sun is up. But if you look at the profile of demand, the sun will come up really, its intensity around 8:30 in the morning, and that's when you have gone through your morning peak. I need that energy between 6 and about 8:30, but the sun only comes after 8:30, so I don't get that benefit.
But also storing that energy is difficult. And
then the evening peak, where you now need it the most, the sun is set around 6, and then you need that energy between 6 and 8. Of course, we'll go and get the new generating sources, but the point I'm making is that we are very close to resolving
the problem. I think the way that you are articulating it, I don't know what the sense in the room is. The way you are articulating it in the technical terms is that we had these cars and we didn't maintain the cars. Now beyond not maintaining the cars, we also didn't incentivize the people who are working on the cars. So then people were disgruntled, so the energy was low. So then you went back and you asked for funding, for more money to be able to almost resuscitate these cars, some of which were decommissioned, and there's a particular car, there's a specific one that wasn't started at all, it never ran, but but it was there. But we are starting it now, that car. Okay, and what that has meant now is that we have a little bit more, we are a bit more positive around how much electricity we can get back into the system. And of course, because we know that we can't store, if we have excess energy, excess electricity, we can't store it, so neighboring countries won't be able to store it either, so they may as well give it to us, right? Okay, I understand. I want to I want to open up to the audience. I think Sputla has said quite a lot. I think and I understand how disgruntled we are as young people and as society, and the implications of load shedding that the minister understands. But I want to say to the minister before I open up, how do young people participate in this space? I mean, you're speaking about skills and the deficit in skill. Is there robust skills development recruitment that's happening? In what space is it in? How do we need to direct our young people to be part of the solution where this crisis is concerned? What are these things that we are signing with China? How do we get in? How do we play to be part of the solution?
Well, there are multiple entry points. So the first one is that the country must prepare itself for a new energy mix, which will largely be coming from renewable resources. So we are sun and wind. So it's important that we work with the universities and institutions of higher learning so that they're able to produce the skills that will be required by the energy sector going into the future. So when I studied my civil engineering, my counterparts were studying heavy electrical engineering. I'm sure their studies were based on coal being the fuel source. So I think it's important that there's that transition also at the university, including opportunities around green hydrogen.
The second curriculum, I guess.
Yes, I mean
the curriculum.
I mean the curriculum. And then the second one is you see, my view is that there's an opportunity in every crisis, and that opportunity must be seized within the life of the crisis. What is the opportunity now? I'm sure you read one study that was released yesterday to say the biggest exports of solar panels to come out of China were here in South Africa. So essentially people are finding ways of mitigating against load shedding. So we're rolling out rooftop solar, but the manufacturing of that solar is sitting somewhere else. And when in fact the primary inputs are sitting here for the production of the solar. And that's why we're going into a space now to ensure that we support the local entities that wants to go into manufacturing of PV solar. We're working with IDC because they are going to require a significant amount of capital injection so that we're able to develop our own industry behind this. Just to give you a sense, we've done a study, the private sector has got about 66 gigawatts or 66,000 megawatts of renewable energy solutions, which will be primarily solar. That's the pipeline of private sector projects. So that's significant. That's an industry on its own. So you need new players, new industrial players in that space, and then we will provide the necessary capital injection that will be required to get this industry going. And then the third one is around someone must install these rooftop solar solutions. So we're working with the banks. And in fact, we'll be announcing in the next 3 weeks or so a program to have over, at the peak, will go up to 250,000 people that will be trained in the area of solar installation, repair, and maintenance. It's a new industry on its own. I mean, if you look at the kind of incentives that government is providing to both industry and household to roll out rooftop solar, you are really generating an industry on its own. And of course, there's some degree of innovation. What are some of those solutions? I just don't know. All I'm saying is that I'm sure an entrepreneur will see in every crisis there's an opportunity, and I'm sure they can carve out what that opportunity is. But these are the three areas where we are investing our resources to make sure that we are able to introduce opportunities for people to benefit and build their own businesses behind the crisis that is confronting the country.
Okay, I think that it makes sense. What is the sense in the room? Can we get already? Okay, can we